Mr. Smith goes to Washington.
To say so, I was ready to tell you that a certain man in my state, a Mr. James Taylor, wanted to put through this dam for his own profit. A man who controls a political machine.
He's one of my favorites. I've got about 15 of his movies at home, and loved him. He meant everything good about motion pictures.
One of Stewart's finest performances was in the 1946 film, It's a Wonderful Life.
Look, Daddy, teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings.
That's right.
He was a struggling Depression-era banker named George Bailey, beloved by townsfolk. People still feel that way today.
It's a Wonderful Life. I mean, I think it's a classic. I think that's what I'll be most remembered for.
President Clinton issued this statement: America lost a national treasure today. Jimmy Stewart was a great actor, a gentleman, and a patriot. Ronald and Nancy Reagan put out this statement: Jimmy Stewart was a close friend who had been a part of our lives forever. We shared so many of life's precious moments with him and Gloria. We will miss him terribly, but we know they're happy to be together once again. Jimmy Stewart waited until he was 41 to get married, and he stayed married. Gloria, his wife of 45 years, died in 1994.
Would you describe his behavior as being like a mailman delivering the mail?
That's not bad. Like a mailman, he would have a job to do, and he would do it.
Actor Orson Bean broke in with Stewart in the 1959 film Anatomy of a Murder.
The legacy that he will leave is one of a superb human being who did his craft, who didn't take himself seriously as a person, but did take himself seriously as a craftsman. And just a decent, wonderful guy who also happened to play extraordinary parts because of the simplicity with which he invested every part.
And Heston was a longtime friend.
He conducted both his career and his life with infinite grace. That was one of the hallmarks of his character. He knew how to be not only a decent man, but that hard thing, a decent public figure.
Stewart says he never lost touch with small-town middle America, growing up in Indiana, Pennsylvania during the 1920s. Fans and family agreed.
He was a great actor, and he was a great person, and I think, you know, people are going to remember him for the man that he was as much as for his film work and whatnot. He's a great man.
We would like to thank the public for the support and affection they gave to our father over many, many years. It has meant a great deal to him and a great deal to the whole family. Thank you very much.
Harvey, I just...
Now, what can I do for you, Mr. Dowd?
What did you have in mind?
Dan Ronan, CNN reporting.
And you can find out more about Jimmy Stewart and share your memories of this beloved star at CNN Interactive on the World Wide Web. You can find it at CNN.com. And Showbiz Today will have more on Jimmy Stewart.
Here, Willie.
What am I, a pack horse? Will be anything else, Miss Molly?
No, that'll be all, thank you. Here, Cupid. Well, take it. Thank you. Come on. Too bad you can't carry a few bundles without complaining.
Oh, I don't mind carrying them.
Well, who are you?
I'm the guy carrying the bundle.
Well, thanks.
All right, boys, let's go.
Music was always important in Jimmy's life and career. His childhood was filled with family song fests, and in various films he played a variety of instruments. As the war abroad intensified, America began gearing up with men and women in every industry pitching in to help. Freedom was imperiled, and Americans of all ages and from all walks of life committed themselves to the war effort.
Hollywood's most famous movie stars leave the film capital to help the government sell war bonds. Irene Dunn, Ronald Colman, Hedy Lamarr, Greer Garson, all part of a contingent of some 50 screen celebrities giving their time and talents to aid the national war effort. Yes, in democratic America, everybody is doing his bit. There goes Jimmy Stewart on his way to enlist. One of the most popular stars on the screen. Joining the Air Force as a private, Jimmy has now won promotion. Today, he's Stewart, USA.
This was a guy with a military tradition in his family, first of all. He, members of his family fought in the Civil War, Spanish-American War. His dad was in World War I. And, of course, nothing was going to keep him out of World War II.
It earned his pilot's license during downtime in his early days as a studio contract player. When flying home to Pennsylvania, he often navigated by following railroad tracks. Stewart's paycheck dropped from $12,000 to $21 a month. He proudly sent 10% to his agent.
Hello. Gee, looks like I'm back in the movies again, doesn't it? Well, as a matter of fact, I like to do some talking. Don't go away until I get this thing off. Now, it isn't as if it was a chore for me to talk to you because I want to speak on my favorite subject, the Army Air Forces. I can't speak from long experience. I've only been in the service a year, but I've learned a lot about what the Air Forces have to offer. That's what I want to talk to you.
Jimmy Stewart didn't fly the milk run. He took his turn like everybody else. And as one old veteran put it, he walked with the same nagging question we all did. Will I be one of the unlucky ones tomorrow?
What's amazing about Jimmy Stewart is what he did in World War II. It is so different in attitude from the attitude of major stars today. It's very hard to imagine anyone, when we entered the Gulf War, sort of going down to a recruiting office and insisting on frontline duty and then flying 20 bombing missions and exposing himself when he didn't have to at all. That's, of course, what Jimmy Stewart did.
Stewart was posted to England as a member of the 8th Air Command. He was squadron commander of several hundred planes in his group, and eventually was made Chief of Staff of the 2nd Combat Wing of the 8th Army Air Corps. He emerged from World War II a full colonel and received both the Air Medal and Distinguished Flying Cross.
I think that Jimmy will always be remembered as the American hero.
At the war's end, America's troops came home, and so did James Stewart. He vetoed plans for an elaborate hero's welcome and was adamant that his war record would not become grist for the Hollywood hype machine. Returning to California, Stewart decided not to re-sign a studio contract and seriously considered retiring from acting altogether.
You are watching A&E's tribute to Jimmy Stewart on Biography. Jimmy Stewart's fans were in an uproar when they found out he was thinking of leaving the movies once he got out of the service. But fortunately, Jimmy received a call from director Frank Capra that changed his plans and led to the most beloved film of his career.
Frank Capra called up James Stewart. He had an idea for a film about a family man, small town, business fails, wants to kill himself, is saved by a guardian angel named Clarence, and so on. Capra was confused and rambling, but Stewart said, "I'll do it." The result was the American classic, It's a Wonderful Life.
What'd you wish, George?
Well, not just one wish, a whole hatful. Mary, I know what I'm going to do tomorrow and the next day and next year and the year after that. I'm shaking the dust of this crummy little town off my feet, and I'm going to see the world. Italy, Greece, the Parthenon, the Colosseum. Then I'm coming back here and go to college and see what they know. And then I'm going to build things. I'm going to build airfields. I'm going to build skyscrapers 100 stories high. I'm going to build bridges a mile long. Oh, you going to throw a rock? Hey, that's pretty good. What'd you wish, Mary?
Buffalo girl, can't you come out tonight? Can't you come out tonight? Can't you come out tonight?
Mary, it's George. Don't you know me? What's happened to us?
I don't know. You let me go.
Mary, please. Oh, don't do this to me. Please, Mary. Help me. Where's our kids? I need you, Mary.
Capra said of the character of George Bailey, "I knew one man who could play it, Jimmy Stewart."
That's my wife! Mary! There you go. Somebody call the police. I'm going to hit him on the head of the bottle. You need a straight jacket. Get out here.
For his performance, Stewart earned his 4th Oscar nomination.
Clarence! Clarence! Help me, Clarence! Get me back! Get me back! I don't care what happens to me! Get me back to my wife and kids! Help me, Clarence, please!
The fool flew all the way up here in a blizzard.
Harry, how about your Banford in New York?
Oh, I left right in the middle of it. As soon as I got Mary's telegram. Good idea, Ernie. A toast. To my big brother, George, the richest man in town.
Though not an immediate box office hit, It's a Wonderful Life has become one of the most beloved films of all time. It is Stewart's personal favorite because he says, it is about a simple idea. You're not born to be a failure.
That's a Christmas present from a very dear friend of mine.
Look, Daddy, teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings.
That's right. That's right. Attaboy, Clarence.
It is also the favorite movie of Gloria Hattrick McLean, who met her future husband at a dinner party given by Mr. and Mrs. Gary Cooper. For years, Hollywood's most eligible bachelor, Jimmy fell in love with Gloria on their very first date. They were married in 1949 at Brentwood's First Presbyterian Church. Gloria had 2 sons from a previous marriage, and the Stewarts became the proud parents of twin girls, Judy and Kelly, in 1951. James Stewart had a new energy and commitment to acting, but found his career drifting.
When he came back from the war, the first movie he did was It's a Wonderful Life, and he waited a while for that. And it was a very dark movie. And the movies that followed were much grayer, much more complex. His characters were more complex. The situations were more complex. I believe that he was intrigued by these kinds of stories because he saw the face of war.
In 1949, Stewart returned to MGM to film the story of a courageous baseball pitcher who had lost his leg in a hunting accident at the height of his career. The New York Times would say that the Stratton story was the best thing that has happened to Mr. Stewart in his post-war career.
I know that Jimmy called me one day, and he called me and he said, Judy, I have 3 scripts here. One is called The Stratton Story, one is called Strategic Air Command, and one is called The Glenn Miller Story. And I won't do any of them unless you do them with me. And he said, I'll send them over. I said, you don't have to send them over, I'll do them. Because I knew he had very good judgment. And I was right.
In 1951, Jimmy earned a 5th Oscar nomination with Harvey, the whimsical comedy featuring an invisible 6'1.5" tall rabbit in the title role and Jimmy as his friend, Elwood P. Dowd. Stewart had first played the part on Broadway in 1947.
I wasn't sure about the movie because, to me, the whole idea of what you do is you have to convince the audience sitting out there, you have to convince the audience that there is a rabbit up there with you, and you're talking to the rabbit. And with the movie, you know, it's not that. You have no audience. You have a camera, and you have electricians, and you have another set next to you. So it seemed different, and I didn't know whether it would work. But the thing is strong enough, so it did work.
Reviewers, however, remarked that he seemed to be playing himself. Stewart took note and began moving away from the folksy roles he'd done so well.
You were never aware of the fact that he was acting.
He is not only a movie star, he's a very subtle, enormously gifted actor.
I think Jimmy Stewart, without question, is the best actor I've ever worked with.
A&E's tribute to Jimmy Stewart, who passed away earlier today, will continue in a moment.
Alfred Hitchcock has an uncanny knack for coming up with the unusual in entertainment.
In the late 40s, Alfred Hitchcock, the English master of suspense, added a new dimension to James Stewart's career by casting him in 4 thrillers in a 10-year period. Stewart said of Hitchcock, he had his own special way of getting to the screen what he had planned so carefully. He knew what he wanted. Stewart considered his collaborations on his 4 films with Hitchcock some of his best work. Cast as the director's alter ego, Stewart was appealing to Hitchcock because of his ability to portray every man trapped in a bizarre situation.
Where the cue for murder was one single crash of the cymbals.
Stewart felt that he had to toughen up, and that doing westerns was a way he could do it and still retain who he was. Winchester 73, made in 1950, revealed him as a believably rugged hero and was one of the 17 westerns he made over the next 2 decades. Stewart seemed to be made for the westerns, and they for him, with his deliberate, no-nonsense way of speaking and his personal mandate for fair play. He found himself often in the role of what one critic called the hero as avenger.
What's your name?
Will Lockhart, what's your name?
That's the only introduction you need, mister.
That's mighty fancy. What's it mean?
It means we're barb riders that's barb salt you're stealing.
I was told this salt's free for the taking.
Well, it ain't. Not the strangers.
Looks like I was told wrong. If there's any charge, I'll pay for it.
You can't buy your way out of this.
Dave, it's only salt the stranger is taking. It'd be different if it was cattle.
If we don't teach him a lesson here and now, how do we know what he'd steal next time?
Any man says I'd rustle cattle is a liar. No need for that, Charlie. And no need for your gun either, mister.
Spud, let's see how good you can use that rope. Go ahead, Spud.
The Centennial is the world premiere of Bend of the River, Universal International's great epic of Oregon Trail days. In Technicolor, it depicts the hardships and adventures of a wagon train that made its way through hostile...
Many actors felt their job was done when the cameras stopped rolling, but not James Stewart.
In filming the picture, the Hollywood group experienced many of the hardships suffered by the original Trailblazers.
There's no one in Hollywood who appears more regularly, more loyally, and more selflessly than Jimmy Stewart and his lovely wife.
Jimmy Stewart, star of Universal International's production, Bend of the River, received Photoplay's award for his performance from Fred R. Samis, vice president of the publication.
Spotlight on big screen.
screen entertainment at New York's Times Square. The gala premiere of Thunder Bay ushers in a wide
Thunder Bay was directed by Anthony Mann, whom Stewart had known since his summer stock days.
sound heightens the entertainment value of the film. Margaret Truman was among the celebrities on hand. The Boris Karloffs and Noel Frankenstein. Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh, the popular Mr. and Mrs. team from Hollywood, greeted by their fans. Xavier Cugat and Abby Lane. The star of the picture, Jimmy Stewart, here for the premiere with the charming Mrs. Stewart, his #1 fan. Jimmy Stewart, plus the wonder of full stage screen, plus the miracle of stereophonic sound, plus Thunder Bay, all adding up to entertainment plus.
Anthony Mann also directed The Glenn Miller Story, a film about the popular band leader who defined the music of a generation and died tragically in a military plane crash in 1944.
The red carpet is out at International Airport in Miami, Florida for film star Jimmy Stewart and his wife Gloria, here for the world premiere of Jimmy's latest picture, The Glenn Miller Story. Civic officials and Air Force Reserve officers greet the World War II bomber pilot who plays the part of the heroic band leader in the Technicolor musical biography. Held simultaneously at 3 theaters, the Miracle, the Miami, and the Carib, the premiere is one of the top events of the winter season.
Jimmy Stewart worked equally as hard at all aspects of his career. He made personal appearances and did promotional tours constantly, maintaining contact with the public.
Jimmy Stewart, in the story of the late great star of music, Glenn Miller.
In Otto Preminger's gripping courtroom drama, Anatomy of a Murder, Stewart portrayed a small-town defense lawyer for which he received his final Oscar nomination.
Your Honor, how can the jury accurately estimate the testimony being given here unless they first know the reason behind this whole trial? Why Lieutenant Mannion shot Barney Quill? Now, the prosecution would like to separate the motive from the act. Well, that's like trying to take the core from an apple without breaking the skin. Well, now, the core of our defense is that the defendant's temporary insanity was triggered by this so-called trouble with Quill. And I begged the court, I begged the court to let me cut into the apple.
Our objection still stands, Your Honor.
Objection overruled.
One constant thread running through Jimmy Stewart's career is his affection for young actors. It was true with Ann Miller in You Can't Take It With You, right up through Stephanie Zimbalist in The Magic of Lassie. Everyone who worked with him in their first film found him to be considerate, patient, and a good guy to lean on.
Shenandoah was my very first movie. I had done a few television shows, and as a matter of fact, I had done a Gunsmoke that Andy McLaughlin had directed, and George Kennedy was in.
I think the first one was a picture called Shenandoah. I had a small part in it. Andy McLaughlin directed it. We were up in Eugene, Oregon. And it was a 3-day sequence, and he and I worked together very comfortably. So much so that he remembered that, and then later on, whenever my name came up for something to do with him, he approved it without question.
And when you work with an actor that is experienced and very good, and you're not so experienced, it's a help just working with someone like that.
The gala first showing in Houston has all of the glamour of Hollywood. Mr. Stewart is a happy man tonight. The consensus is that he has still another hit to add to his long line of notable pictures.
In Fool's Parade, Stewart was reunited with director Andy McLaughlin and actor George Kennedy.
I remember one time in Fool's Parade, we also had a brilliant actor named Strother Martin, a character actor. And in the script, it called for Strother to be kind of a dingbat who had a pencil, a pad, and a piece of string. And Jimmy said he can have the pencil. Now, you have to understand, folks, that Strother Martin was a very busy actor. If you go back to the old days and you remember Jack Oakey or Donald Meek or Edward Everett Horton, those were busy actors. You couldn't put them on the screen and then have too much else going on because nobody's looking anywhere but at them anyway, right? Well, Strother was this sort of actor. And Jimmy said he can have the pencil, he can have the pad, but you ain't giving him that piece of string.
A&E's tribute to Jimmy Stewart, who passed away earlier today, will continue in a moment.
After a 23-year absence from Broadway, Stewart was lured back to New York to reprise a special role that has had a continuing impact on his life.
I did the play with Helen Hayes a while. Then I, with Alexander Cohen, produced it. I did it in London. I did it for 6 months in London.
Like other stars of his generation, Stewart worked in television. He starred in his own series of telefilms about a small-town lawyer named Hawkins, and portrayed a lonely janitor who dreamed of conducting the Mormon Tabernacle Choir in the well-received TV movie Mr. Kruger's Christmas.
Feel better now?
Betty Davis and James Stewart worked with each other for the first time in their careers on what was Hollywood's first film made expressly for cable television, Right of Way.
That's a chance we'll have to take. I'm not interested in taking any chances just now.
I directed Betty Davis in a film called A Piano for Mrs. Cimino. And shortly thereafter, Betty called me and said that she had found this play by Richard Lees called Right of Way, which she was very excited about, would like to do. Would I consider directing it? And Jimmy Stewart was the ideal person to play her husband. In fact, I believe Richard claims he wrote the part with not only Betty, but Jimmy Stewart in mind. It was a story of an elderly couple who decided to kill themselves.
We've lived together, and now we're going to die together. We just wanted you to know. We decided that was only fair. And besides, there are some arrangements that have to be made for you and for us.
You're not serious. Yes.
We are.
The time that disease strikes, they've agreed that they're going to go together rather than to be separated. And I must say, it made me conscious of this problem, and I have seen story after story in the newspaper since then. I found directing Jimmy to be a pleasure. Both he and Betty came from the old school of major movie stars who really knew what they were doing.
Throughout his life, Stewart quietly kept his ties with the military, eventually becoming a brigadier general with the Air Force Reserve. The conservative values he grew up with remain with him to this day, and he is active in his support of those things which he loves, such as his alma mater and the Triangle Club.
Evening. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to sing a song for you from our show that opened here tonight. The name of the show is The Tiger Smiles, and it was written by an undergraduate by the name of Josh Logan. I play the part of the juvenile lead, Bruce.
You know, he got an award from his alma mater, from Princeton, about 4 years ago, the Woodrow Wilson Award for service to the country.
You see, the Princeton Triangle Club is made up of young men between the ages of 18 and 21. And since we don't have any girl students at Princeton, we have to, of necessity, use the boys playing the girls' part.
Somebody asked me the other day how Princeton would justify its giving a movie actor an award for service to the country. And I said, because Jimmy has probably given more pleasure to more people than anybody we can think of.
So then you looked me over a moment or two.
and said, because it's Sunday, it's got to be on Sunday, and said, because it's Sunday, you'll do.
I think he stood for decency. He stood for everything that is good in Hollywood. There was nothing evil about him. You couldn't dig up any scandal on him if you tried.
Jimmy Stewart was a big star at a time when people believed that Hollywood stars represented the best of America. And Jimmy Stewart did represent the best of America.
He's a vast human being. He's the best I've ever seen on the screen. But I think the part of the greatness of his makeup is the fact that he has always realized how fragile and how human he is.
And I think Jimmy Stewart is everybody's friend. And he certainly has been a wonderful friend to me.
James Stewart says he'd like to be remembered as a man who believed in hard work, decent values, a love of country, family, community, and God. His movies reflect those beliefs, and audiences for more than 50 years have embraced Jimmy Stewart as their hometown hero.
Although Jimmy Stewart is gone, for audiences, he will live on as George Bailey, Mr. Smith, and all the other memorable characters he played. That's the wonderful thing about movies. As Jimmy himself once said, if you're good and you're lucky enough, what you're doing is giving people little tiny pieces of time that they'll never forget. For A&E, I'm Karen Stone. Good night.
Tomorrow night, join an all-new Ancient Mysteries with Leonard Nimoy for an enlightening journey into the darkest depths of the Amazon, where ferocious rainforest warriors live up to the name Headhunters at 9 Eastern, 10 Pacific. Now, American Justice is next on A&E.